Welcome to the show. It's good to be back. The kids are back in school. That means I'm back here behind this desk, and I hope you have had a great summer. We took a few months off to relax a little bit ourselves, and not quite as many TV watchers maybe in the summer months, especially in the evenings and early mornings. So took a little break, and here we are back at it. And not only does it mean the kids are back in school and we're back here on the set, but also college football is back. So we'll be talking a lot of college football today. It'll be just me, no guest this week. We'll get back with a guest here in the weeks coming, but we'll be talking a lot of college football. I remember back when I was, a kid, it seemed like school didn't start until after Labor Day for the most part. It seemed like we're usually done around Memorial Day. School schedules have changed. It's like mid-August anymore. But here we are, and college football coming back a little bit earlier than usual also. Game this week, believe it or not. University of Florida versus the University of Miami. Great matchup down there in the state of Florida, be at Camping World Stadium in Orlando. So neutral site for the a team from Gainesville and a team from Miami. A little bit closer perhaps to Gainesville, but nonetheless should be a lot of fun for people down in Florida, and a big-time matchup between two big-time programs that have had a lot of success over the years. Of course, the University of Miami, not as strong in recent years. Florida, has dipped a little bit in recent years, but I really like this Florida coach, Danny Mullen. Listen, here's the deal. I know Danny Mullen. I've watched him since he was a graduate assistant at Notre Dame. He actually got that graduate assistant job over me. I almost had a chance to get that job, but they just given the job to Danny Mullen, and my life turned out very differently than maybe it would have been if I had gotten that job. But my life has turned out great, so I'm happy with it. But I've always followed Danny because of that, and he's had great success everywhere he's been. He latched on to Urban Meyer when he was the receivers coach at Notre Dame, followed him to Bowling Green as his offensive coordinator, then to Utah, then to Florida as Urban Meyer's offensive coordinator there, and then Danny Mullen got his first head coaching job at Mississippi State, where he did a fantastic job resurrecting that program and bringing it to being one of the better teams in the SEC, not to the elite level, but really a good team, and then that landed him the job at Florida ultimately. And, they had a really good season last year, finished really strong, really punished Michigan, blew them out in the bowl game, and, finished the season with 4 wins. And University of Miami, struggled a little bit. They've been an up-and-down team, relatively new coach there as well. But I think Florida, is really going to get things rocking and rolling here in the next couple of years, back to the level where they had it, maybe in the last, from the 90s into the 2000s. I think Danny Mullen will just do that to that program. I think he'll bring a lot of success there, and I think they get that going with a great start to the season this week. That game will be 7 o'clock on ESPN on Saturday night. I will take Florida in that game, but I think the University of Miami will show up for that game and look good. But I think the Florida will be too much for them. So hard to believe college football already back. And as I said, that'll be the focus of today's show. We'll talk WVU. We'll talk Ohio State. We'll talk about this carousel of quarterbacks that seems to be happening in college football and the Heisman race. And we'll finish off today's show by talking about the college football playoff. Always an exciting part of college football. It brings a lot to that time of year, I think, around the New Year's holiday, and I'll be giving you my picks as to who gets there. So great show planned here today. Stay with us. We're going to take a break. When I come back, we'll be talking all about WVU and Ohio State. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
Recommended by the highest authorities. Danoon Lumber.
Looks like a bad one's coming. Yeah, right?
The Panhandle Difference.
It was a really easy process getting started with them, and then bam, it just took off. We've had a lot of gatherings here. We've had a whole basketball team. We've had lots of family dinners, birthday parties. I mean, I can't wait for holidays to come. It's a great kitchen. Honestly, it couldn't have turned out any better.
With Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, and we're gonna save you.
Welcome back to the show. Let's talk about two local college football teams, fan favorites, WVU and Ohio State. both with new head coaches this year. Of course, Neil Brown at WVU, Ryan Day at Ohio State, and in their debut seasons as coaches, people maybe not knowing what quite to expect from those programs, and maybe the expectations a little bit higher, of course, at Ohio State than they are in Morgantown. But let's talk about each program. First of all, WVU. I think they're going to be better than people think. You know, you look at first of all, let me start with Neil Brown. Neil Brown has really impressed me with what I've seen and heard of him so far. I haven't had an opportunity to meet him, and I hope to get to at some point just because I've been so impressed with him. But seems like a real family man. You see his wife and his young kids with him in different places that he goes, whether it be around the facility or whether it be at charitable events, things like that. Seems to be really enthusiastic, have a great football mind, had success at Troy, a program that really not many people have heard a lot about, but really had some success there. And now, you know, getting his first opportunity at a Power 5 school, and by being at WVU and competing in the Big 12. And, you know, the first big decision he had to make is who's going to be the quarterback for this team. And he kept that, you know, pretty close to the vest, just announcing here this week that Austin Kendall, the transfer from Oklahoma, will be the starting quarterback for WVU when the team opens on August 31st. So, you know, the big question there is, though, you know, will Austin Kendall remain the starting quarterback? And one of the reasons that's a big question is that Jared Dagey, who's a transfer from Bowling Green, was just granted this week immediate eligibility by the NCAA. You know, he's not going to have to sit out, but there was a lot of question mark there as to whether he'd be eligible this year or not. So how many reps do you give a guy like that in practice? And you know, he wasn't there with the team in the spring and things like that, so he didn't have as much time to learn the system like Austin Kendall did. Of course, Trey Lowe sitting there behind them, and Allison, Jack Allison, who played in the bowl game last year. But Austin Kendall, the Oklahoma transfer, named the starting quarterback by Neil Brown. And you look at a guy like Kendall, you know, the last couple of years, he was at Oklahoma, sat behind two Heisman winners, I mean, almost unheard of, behind Baker Mayfield 2 years ago, behind Kyler Murray last year. So, you know, how do you like to be behind those two guys? You know, that's your competition. The guys winning the Heisman Trophy back-to-back years. But in that system and learning a lot and watching those guys and repping in practice, things of that nature, and obviously being a part of a big-time program, now here in Morgantown with an opportunity to be the starting quarterback. And that may, you know, tell a lot about what happens with the WVU season. Some really good running backs back. The receiving core, obviously, anytime you're replacing guys like Sills and Jennings and those guys, you know, you got some work to do. But a couple of stud offensive linemen that are getting a lot of preseason honors, including a local product, McKivitz. And, you know, the Mountaineers, I think, offensively are going to be a pretty darn good football team. Then you look at the defensive side of the ball, and they've struggled there a little bit in recent years, but so has everyone in the Big 12. It's not a surprise to struggle on defense in the Big 12 conference. It's an offensive-minded conference, so it's not like you're way behind if you're not the most solid defensive team. And I think this defense will be better. I've never been a huge fan of the 3-3 stack that was utilized by Tony Gibson, the former defensive coordinator, and Jeff Castile before him. I've just not been a big fan of that defense. So I think bringing a new scheme, new defensive coordinator could really help that defense. And also, perhaps the teams that they'll be facing, you know, aren't seeing the same thing they've seen in past years from the WVU defense. So I think that they're going to be better than people think. I think a bowl game will be there for this team at the end of the year. I think they may surprise a team or two here and there. I think they'll lose some games as well. You know, much tougher non-conference schedule than what we're accustomed to seeing with, you know, games at Missouri, NC State coming to Morgantown early in the season. And then you get that Big 12 schedule, and you've got some teams there that you know are going to be solid teams in Texas, Oklahoma, and others. So I don't think it's going to be a double-digit win season or anything like that. But I do think that there'll be more wins out there than people think. I could see the Mountaineers getting to like an 8-win type season, and I think it'll be a really good first season for Neil Brown and Morgantown. So I'll say Mountaineers finish 8-4 and really surprise some people. Let's turn to Columbus and talk about Ohio State, where Urban Meyer has been at the head of that program for a number of years now, and you know, no longer there. Ryan Day takes over. Now, of course, he filled in for Urban Meyer when Urban Meyer was forced to miss some games, but his first time really this being his program and being in charge for the entire season. And, you know, a little bit of tough task in some ways to, you know, the schedule was, you know, it's the Big 12, or excuse me, the Big 10 schedule. It's always a tough schedule, but they do get Michigan State at home, Wisconsin at home, Penn State all at home, but Michigan on the road this year. And, you know, also having to look and break in a new quarterback as well. Haskins moved on to the NFL, first-round draft pick. You hate to, have a new quarterback when you're also a new head coach. And they're going to have, Justin Fields, the Georgia transfer at quarterback. He's another guy that was able to transfer and was granted immediate eligibility. So a lot of talent there. Didn't get to see a whole lot of him at Georgia last year. They put him into some situations where be more of a running game type situations where they would put him in and not give him a ton of opportunity to do things and see him because they had such a good quarterback in Jacob Fromm already there. But the interesting thing to see will be whether or not Justin Fields can get acclimated as quickly as he needs to. Now, the nice thing is that Ohio State's early schedule is never real challenging. They don't see bigger games usually until early to mid-October. So he'll have a little bit of time to get acquainted there. But there's going to be some bumps along the way. There always are with a new head coach. I mean, this is Ryan Day's first shot at a program, and they'll lose, I think, a couple of games. And I think for the first time in a number of years, they'll lose that team up north, they like to call them, Michigan. Jim Harbaugh up at Michigan hasn't had that win over Ohio State yet. Urban Meyer had his number. I think this is the year with it being at Michigan. Jim Harbaugh is really going to need that win. Michigan's shaping up to probably to have a nice team this year as well. So I think Ohio State finishes, along the lines of 10-2, including that loss to Michigan as being one of those two losses, and has a really good season. But I just don't think I don't see them coming out with an undefeated type season or a one-loss type season where they're able to get themselves into the college football playoff mix. They may still be alive for it heading into that last week of the regular season, but I just think that Michigan beats them in that regular season finale in Ann Arbor. So it'll be fun to watch, though, and see, for fans here in the Ohio Valley to see both WVU and Ohio State with these new coaches and what the shape those programs may take for the next several years to come. And I'm particularly excited to see what happens in Morgantown because I think Neil Brown's the right type of guy for the state of West Virginia, the right type of guy for that program. So I'm excited. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking all about this quarterback carousel and also the Heisman Trophy race and what we may see this year in that regard. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
When reviewing your oil and gas offers or royalty check statements, do you wonder, am I being offered a fair amount? Do I feel comfortable reading the statement? Do I have peace of mind? If you answered no to these questions, you need Bordas Mineral Management. Our passion is helping mineral owners protect and expand their mineral wealth. Our examiners tell you whether you're being treated fairly and getting paid what is rightfully yours. Bordas Mineral Management. Be protected. Have peace of mind.
Sunset Motors is the 2019 Ohio Valley leader in Jeep, Ram, Chrysler, and Dodge sales. During the summer clearance event, get up to 25% off 2019 Rams, starting at $29,999, or lease one for $299 per month. Everyone qualifies. Lease a Compass Latitude for $259 per month, or get 0% financing. Lease a Cherokee Latitude Plus for $299 per month, or get 0%. Lease a Grand Cherokee for $319 per month, or get 0%.
You can love where you drive at Sunset.
Welcome back to the show. We've been talking college football. We'll continue to do that. And I want to talk about this carousel of quarterbacks that's been happening and then also the Heisman Trophy race. But first, let's talk quarterbacks. I have never seen a year in college football that's been like this. When you look at the number of quarterbacks that have either transferred into big-time programs or transferred out of big-time programs, and in some cases transferred out of a big-time program and into a big-time program. I mean, it's unprecedented, really. And the transfer rules have changed in recent years, and that's contributed to this. It used to be that in order to transfer, you had to sit out a year. And if you had eligibility left, you used your eligibility then. You get basically 5 years to play, 4 years of eligibility, but you'd have to sit out a year if you transferred. And those rules changed in recent years. Now, if you graduate from the college you're at and you go somewhere else and they don't offer a program, your former school didn't offer a program that you wanted to study for your graduate program, then you can transfer to a new school. And basically, if you transfer to the new school, you find a program that you want to study that your old school didn't have, so it's pretty easy to do. But that's led to a lot of quarterbacks transferring because they don't have to sit out now. A lot of players in general, but especially quarterbacks transferring because they don't have to sit out now if they've graduated. And in some instances, the NCAA is even granting eligibility under certain circumstances to players who haven't graduated. And because of that, we see all these transfers. For example, Jalen Hurts, of course, the former Alabama quarterback, has won national championships, has started in college football playoff games, now the starting quarterback at Oklahoma. Of course, a void there at quarterback in Oklahoma as a result of Baker Mayfield graduating 2 years ago, leaving, Kyler Murray leaving. And now Jalen Hurts, the starting quarterback at Oklahoma. Brandon Wimbush gets beat out by Ian Book at Notre Dame after having started a number of games at Notre Dame. Now quarterback, University of Central Florida, of course, their starting quarterback suffered that terrible leg injury last year late in the season. And so they're needing a quarterback. So Brandon Wimbush, who's beaten out at Notre Dame, transfers to Central Florida, who's had a lot of success in the last couple of years. Austin Kendall, of course, is going to be sitting behind Jalen Hurts now to Oklahoma after sitting behind Baker Mayfield, after sitting behind Kyler Murray. So he decides to transfer to WVU, even an in-conference school. And he'll be the starting quarterback at WVU. Justin Fields, down at Georgia last year, sitting behind Jake Fromm, a great quarterback down there, and he says, how long do I want to do this? Transfers to Ohio State, who has a void at quarterback left by the departure of Dwayne Haskins. Jacob Eason out at Washington, another Georgia quarterback who found himself behind Jake Fromm, transfers to Washington, another top 25 program. He'll be the starting quarterback out at Washington. Brandon Peters was the quarterback at Michigan, transfers now at Illinois. And who's at Michigan now? Shea Patterson. This will be year 2 for him at Michigan, but he'd formerly been the Ole Miss quarterback and had a lot of success there, graduated and transferred using his final 2 years of eligibility at Michigan. And then Kelly Bryant, let's not forget him. Kelly Bryant was the starting quarterback at Clemson, led them to the college football playoff, was a starting quarterback, beaten out by the freshman last year, Lawrence, and transfers to Missouri. So Mountaineer fans will get an opportunity to see Kelly Bryant, who's been was a great quarterback at Clemson, but was beaten out by an even appeared to be better quarterback in Lawrence, and will now be the starting quarterback at Missouri. So I mean, it's almost hard to keep track of these guys. It's almost like free agency in professional sports now with these college football quarterbacks, especially these big names. So I think it's going to bring a ton of excitement personally to the program, and I like that they're letting kids transfer. Look, don't hold these kids hostage. They already don't get paid. They're getting a scholarship. If they get it to this school or this school, it doesn't matter. Coaches leave. You know, coaches may be under a 5-year contract. Player goes to play for that coach. Coach leaves. You know, kid may want to play for another coach. May not be comfortable with the new coach with that program, or he may just find himself where, hey, maybe he's the second best quarterback in the country, but he's sitting behind the first best one. Let's let this kid play. Let's watch him play football. Great example. That's Jalen Hurts. You know, going to be at Oklahoma now. I mean, he sat on the bench for the better part of last year behind Tua I can say his name, Tagovailoa. I can never say that name, at Alabama. You know, you've got Eason and Fields who are sitting behind Fromm at Georgia. Let's let these kids all play. It makes college football that much more exciting to have the great players playing. So I'm really excited about it. I'm glad that it's happening. You get these kids in at these programs that are, you know, on TV every Saturday. Going to be a lot of fun to watch. So I'm really excited about it. So let's talk about how this Heisman race shapes up. And I think some of these players, you know, play a role in it. Jake Fromm, I think at Georgia, certainly going to be a Heisman candidate. You know, the challenge for him is going to be that schedule. I mean, that SEC schedule is always tough. You know, you got the likes of Florida on there. Then, of course, they have Notre Dame coming down to Athens this year, playing Georgia down at Georgia. And, of course, Notre Dame coming off of a college football playoff appearance last year. And, you know, I think it'll be tough for Jake Fromm, but he's going to get a lot of exposure playing that schedule and is an outstanding quarterback. And that's, you know, talking about the SEC quarterbacks, Tua Tagovailoa, who I've already mentioned before, you know, was kind of the leading Heisman candidate most of last year before Kyler Murray kind of overtook him at the end. And I think he's going to have another great season. And of course, anytime you're the Alabama quarterback, you're going to have opportunities because your team's going to win games. Trevor Lawrence down at Clemson, I already mentioned him. He, of course, a freshman last year and looked fantastic. Only going to be even better this year with the year under his belt of experience. Ian Book at Notre Dame, you know, really highly efficient passer, very accurate, great manager of the game. And, of course, Notre Dame on national TV pretty much every week gets a lot of opportunities to be seen there. And Notre Dame's schedule this year, you know, we'll talk about that in a minute, but has a lot of big-name opponents on there, so he'll have chances to do that. And, you know, Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma. You know, you're talking about a guy who's played at a very high level, started a lot of games, played in the college football playoff on multiple occasions. He's going to be out there at Oklahoma in Lincoln Riley's offense. I mean, Lincoln Riley is a young offensive genius. I mean, he's just a fantastic coach. He'll put him in situations where he can succeed. And then, so you've got a bunch of quarterbacks there. And I'm going to give you a running back, too, Jonathan Taylor at Wisconsin. Anytime you have an opportunity to run the football behind that big, powerful Wisconsin line. I mean, they get those big guys that are, you know, it seems like they're all grew up in the cornfields and have an opportunity to drink all that Wisconsin dairy milk. You know, the big offensive linemen, and you get a good Wisconsin running back, they're going to get their yardage and they're going to be in the mix. And Jonathan Taylor is a guy to watch out for at Wisconsin this year, because I think he can get himself into the Heisman race and really make a name for himself. But at the end of the day, I think Tua wins it. I mean, Alabama, I think, will have a great season. He can run it. He can throw it. He's got some experience under his belt now. I just think that it'll be tough for anyone to beat him out for the Heisman. So he's my favorite. But don't be surprised if one of those other guys jumps up there as well, because these prolific passers really all have an opportunity, I think, to win it. So it should be fun to watch them, though, and see what happens. We're going to take a break, and when we come back for our final segment, we'll be talking college football playoff, and I'll give you my picks. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
At Ferguson's House of Furniture, you'll find the largest selection of the best brand name furniture and mattresses in the tri-state area. Going on now, the more you spend, the more you save. Save up to 20% off your entire purchase. From living room and bedroom to dining and mattresses, we are your one-stop shop with our 80,000 square foot showroom. Stop in today or shop online at daretocompareus.com.
Ferguson's House of Furniture. Make yourself at home.
Recommended by the highest authorities. Danoon Lumber.
It's like a bad one's coming. Yeah. Right?
Welcome back to the show. We've been talking college football because it's that time of year, and let's talk the college football playoff. This is always one of my favorite segments of the year, when I get to pick the college football playoff that won't happen for months from now and try to guess what's going to happen. I did pretty well last year, hit several of the teams, but this year we'll see how I do. I'm going to start off with Clemson, a team that's made it to the college football playoff now several years in a row. I don't think they go undefeated 2 years in a row here. I just don't think it's going to happen. Last year, that great undefeated season, put it on Notre Dame in the first playoff game, in the first round of the playoffs, and then in the championship game, really kind of did the same thing to Alabama. Really surprised a lot of people. But I don't think they go undefeated 2 years in a row. They have Texas A&M in game 2. Now, that game is at home. It's at Clemson in Death Valley, a really tough place to play. I've been to a game down there, and man, it's loud and the fans are into it, and it sits down in that kind of bowl, and it's a loud place to play. But Jimbo Fisher, the head coach of Texas A&M, really knows Clemson from his days coaching at Florida State. They almost knocked off Clemson last year. I think this is a real problem game for Clemson, and they still have the rest of that schedule to navigate as well. I think even if they would happen to get by A&M there in the game in week 2, I think they lose somewhere along the way. But I think their body of work over the last several years will influence the committee enough, in addition to what they do this year, and they'll be the ACC champs, that I think they'll still get in the playoffs. So I'll take Clemson as my first playoff team. Next team I'll take will be out of the Big 12. Of course, Oklahoma, been in the playoff mix, was in there last year. Their big game will be Texas. I like Jalen Hurts' experience, coming from Alabama and now being at Oklahoma. And Lincoln Riley, as I said earlier in the show, offensive genius, and he'll develop game plans that utilize Jalen Hurts' talents. But I don't think Oklahoma gets in this year. They won't be my pick out of the Big 12. Instead, it's going to be Texas. Tom Herman, in his third year now of that program, he was a former Ohio State offensive coordinator. He got that program really kind of going again now. And Sam Ehlinger back at quarterback, maybe the toughest guy on their team, and he's their quarterback. They're coming off a big win against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Of course, they knocked off Oklahoma midseason last year, and the Red River rivalry. The Big 12 is going to be breaking in some new coaches this year, some new quarterbacks. One of Texas's big games is going to be early on. It's a non-conference game against LSU, but it's at Texas. I think that if they beat LSU, which I think they will, and they win the Big 12 title game, which I think they will, they'll get it even if they lose a game somewhere along the way. I could see them losing that Red River rivalry game this year to Oklahoma, but still, by beating LSU out of conference, a strong SEC team, by winning the rest of their games, by winning the Big 12 title, I think Texas gets in, so they're going to be my second pick is Texas. Third pick, almost an easy one, Alabama. I mean, it's just hard to pick against them. Nick Saban has done it time and time again. He just reloads that recruiting cycle every year, just gets those 5-star guys, the talent all over the place. Tua's back at quarterback. That defense is always unbelievably fast, strong, big. They can fly around. They pick off passes. I mean, you name it, they can do it. It's just almost impossible to not see Alabama doing it. Of course, they play that tough schedule every year, but everybody knows it's tough, and the committee knows it's tough. Alabama will navigate their way through that schedule. They may lose a game somewhere along the way, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they'll win the SEC championship. They will be in the college football playoff. My fourth and final team, all right, maybe I pick with my heart every year, but it worked for me last year. I'm going to go with Notre Dame, my alma mater. Now, Notre Dame, the reason I'm picking Notre Dame is I think Brian Kelly is one of the best coaches in college football. He won national championships in Division II years back. He took Cincinnati to be an undefeated team, got the Notre Dame job, has done very well other than maybe 1 year. Got into the national title game, got beat by Alabama, got to the playoff last year, lost to Clemson, but the schedule is really tough. And that's one of the reasons I like Notre Dame to get to the playoff. They have to go at Georgia. They have to go at Michigan. They have to play at Stanford. They have USC at home. You know, you're talking about big name programs and 3 of them being on the road. If they navigate that schedule, they'll be in. The question is, can a one-loss Notre Dame team get in? I think this year they can. If it's a close loss at Georgia or a close loss at Michigan, I think it's still enough to get in. It can't be a loss at Stanford because that's the last game of the season. You can't be a one-loss team with your last game being a loss and no conference championship game because people put more stock in that than they should, in my opinion. But nonetheless, I think Notre Dame gets in the 4th and final spot. So I think it'll be Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Texas. My heart wants to pick Notre Dame to win it all, but my head tells me pick Alabama. So I'm going to pick Alabama to win it all this year. But Big Ten, Pac-12 shut out again. And what I think that's going to do is really create a push now, an even bigger push for an 8-team playoff. If those 2 conferences get shut out for the 2nd year in a row, I think that people start saying, wait a minute here, let's look at a wild card system. Let's give the Power 5 schools, and I've been advocating for this for years, even before it really became in style to do so. I've been saying 8-team playoff, 5 power conference schools, and then 3 wild cards. And I think one of the wild cards should go to any non-Power 5 school that's undefeated, those mid-majors that are undefeated. But 3 wild cards that the committee can pick, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. Then the committee will also seed those teams, those 8 teams. So there'll be a role for the committee still. It won't just be, hey, we have nothing to do. It'll be picking the 3 wild cards and then seeding the 8 teams. I think it'll be a blast. I'd really like to see the committee do that. Hope they get to it sometime soon. And I think a finish like this will lead to more outcry for, hey, we got to have the Big Ten champion in. We got to have the Pac-12 champion in. And I think that would lead to that. So I'm really hoping it happens. But it should be a lot of fun. I'm excited for the college football season. I hope you are too. I hope you enjoy the game this week between the U and the University of Florida. And we'll talk again next week and see shape up how the following week's schedule looked as the season goes on, and we'll talk some NFL football, and we'll have a guest as well. Thanks for joining in. It's been good to be with you all. We'll see you next time on the Jamie Bordas Show.